Hi, this is Carlos. Look for my book, Lessons from Mars, at Amazon or wherever you buy books, or visit my website, lessonsfrommars.net. Welcome back. It is Carlos Valdez-Stepane, and I'm delighted to be with you to talk more about high-performance collaboration and teamwork. We are now at the point in these podcasts where I'm talking about the specifics of the framework for high-performance collaboration. We're going to start with the first of the 6 practices, as I've described them so far: clarify context. It was a while back. I was working with a marketing team down in Nashville, Tennessee. They'd undergone a number of changes. The organization itself had undergone a series of changes, and they were just not operating well as a group. I had done the interviews, as I always do. I had administered a survey. I had all the data, and I came in ready to help them think about why they were a team. In other words, what their purpose was, what work they needed to share. And it wasn't long before, and I mean probably a half day into a 2-day workshop, that I realized they weren't ready to answer those questions because they didn't quite understand why they were a team. There'd been a big reorg. And in fact, there had been a couple of reorgs as this part of the business had made some acquisitions. And so this group had been cobbled together, and no one had ever stopped and said, hang on, as a member of this team, what is it exactly we're supposed to be doing? The organization might know, HR might know, but we're not sure. And so we stopped, and we actually put a big piece of paper on a wall. We covered an entire wall, I think, with 12 feet of 4-foot-high paper. Everybody got markers, and I wrote, I made a timeline going from, I don't remember the exact years, just for argument's sake, let's say 2007 to 2012. And I said, I want you to tell me your story. What's the history of this group that has gone through so much change? And I think we used 3 categories. What's the history of our business here in Nashville? What's the history of the bigger business globally? And what was happening in the outside world that might have impact? Oh, and there was a 4th. The comings and goings. When did people leave the team? When did they arrive? Well, what an animated and exciting session that was, as they used colored markers and drew some lines and drew some pictures and created illustrations to tell their story. And I can't honestly remember the story or stories that emerged, but the degree of change was massive. And most of the people in this team were relatively new, and they had no context. They hadn't been through so much of what the broader organizational team had been through. So much change in membership, so much change in strategy, and so forth. And that changed everything. That is a classic example of clarifying context. This team wasn't really sure. It knew what it had been once upon a time, but wasn't sure what it needed to be going forward. And so they had to clarify the journey they'd been on to understand where they stood today and what that meant for the degree of change they had to go through to get where the organization wanted them to be. Clarify context. It makes a huge difference. If you're trying to create clarity for a team and they don't have a sense of their organizational context, this is the practice you'll want to employ. I've got a couple of tools for this. They're described in the appendix of the book, Lessons from Mars. Even if you made up your own approach, the goal is the same, right? Get clarity about why the organization has created this team and what they expect from it. So that's it for clarify context. I've got 2 other practices that relate to the clarity imperative, and we'll get to those in the next podcast. Talk to you then. If you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful, please rate the show on iTunes or contact me with your feedback through my website, lessonsfrommars.net. You can find my book, Lessons from Mars, at Amazon or wherever you prefer to buy books, or again through my website, lessonsfrommars.net.